So in green are the bars where patients show adequate adherence. So that's during the normal day hours, let's say between 10 o'clock in the morning and 8 o'clock at night, when patients are mostly outside of the house and they are adhering to wearing the shoes. But it's in these evening hours and also night hours where patients are low in adherence to wearing the footwear. They are also less active during these hours, so they take fewer steps, but they still take quite a few steps, a couple of hundred of steps over such a 2-hour time period, and that's where their adherence is low. So for those periods, that's where we want to find a solution in order to improve adherence. When patients are asked about the reasons for not wearing their prescribed footwear indoors, they often say that the shoes are too heavy, that they are difficult to put on or to take off, that they are experienced as being too warm, they get dirty from coming outside, or it's just a habit. So there's many reasons why patients do not wear their footwear indoors. So for that, we did a study where our aim was to develop custom-made footwear that was specifically designed for use indoors, that does meet the quality standards of international guidelines, and that results in increased footwear adherence for wearing a custom-made shoe or insole that you provide. And on the right-hand side, you see an example of such indoor shoes. We had a set of requirements where, for example, the peak plantar pressures that you measure in such a shoe should be comparable to the ones that you have in your normal custom-made shoes, because in fact, what you are doing inside the house is replacing those outdoor or normal custom-made shoes with these special indoor shoes. So they should be, in terms of quality and pressure relief, as good as the normal custom-made shoes. They should be easy to put on and take off. They should be lighter in weight. They should be heat regulating and breathable, safe to use, of course. They should be looking in a way that they support and stimulate use indoors, but not necessarily outdoors. They should also be durable, because they have to go on for a year or 1.5 years. And they should be able to be alternatively worn with the current custom-made footwear. So there's a couple of requirements that we set for the development of such kind of shoes. And looking at the peak pressures that we measure, you see here different regions of the foot, where in the green you see the special house shoe that was developed, and in blue you see the normal custom-made shoes. And as you can see, there were no differences for these different regions on the hallux and the digits and the metatarsal heads between the house shoe and the outdoor shoe. So for that most important requirement, that in quality and pressure relief they are comparable to the outdoor shoes, that criterion was achieved. So what happens with the adherence when patients are provided with such a special shoe? Well, the adherence significantly goes up, in particular in patients that are low in adherence before being provided with such an indoor shoe. So the total adherence goes from about 60% of steps that they take in their provided footwear to more than 70% when they are provided with the special indoor shoes, in addition to their normal custom-made shoes. And this is mainly achieved, as you would expect, of course, when patients are indoors. So indoors, before being provided with special shoes, they have adherence of 40%, and that increases to approximately 70% after being provided with these indoor shoes. And that is measured 1 month after they are provided with the shoes. But we also now have long-term follow-up data in a subgroup of patients that shows that for the total adherence, but for the adherence indoor and also for outdoor, that the increased adherence after 1 month, that maintains over a longer period of time. So after 1 year, the adherence is still at the same level as was measured after 1 month. So this seems to be a solution, a footwear solution, where special shoes are provided that are much easier to use indoors, but still have good offloading properties that increase the adherence and maintain the adherence over time. What I now wanted to do is to finish with showing you a patient education video that we made within the Amsterdam University Medical Center that stresses the need for pressure relief and for footwear adherence. Mensen met diabetes kunnen te maken krijgen met complicaties aan de voeten, zoals wonden. Om deze wonden te voorkomen, kunnen op maat gemaakte schoenen worden voorgeschreven. Deze meneer heeft een wond onder zijn voet gehad en krijgt vandaag nieuwe op maat gemaakte schoenen.
Patiënten met diabetes kunnen voetwonden ontwikkelen omdat ze een verminderd gevoel hebben en ook omdat er vaak voetvormveranderingen optreden. Hierdoor ontstaan plekken met toegenomen druk. En ongemerkt kunnen zo blaren of overmatige eeltplekken ontstaan. En dit kan weer leiden tot ernstige infecties, waarvoor soms zelfs amputaties nodig zijn. Daarom schrijven we voor patiënten met diabetes vaak deels of geheel op maat gemaakte schoenen voor. De belangrijkste eigenschap van op maat gemaakte schoenen is het goed verdelen van de druk. En daarmee verminder je dus de kans op het ontstaan van wonden. Een goede drukverdeling kun je niet zien of voelen, maar gelukkig kunnen we dat tegenwoordig wel meten. En daarom controleren we alle op maat gemaakte schoenen met een drukmeting die we uitvoeren tijdens het lopen.
De druk is gemeten tijdens het lopen op blote voeten, in de oude schoenen en in de nieuwe op maat gemaakte schoenen. Dit is de drukverdeling tijdens het lopen op blote voeten. De pieken geven de hoogste druk weer. Vooral waar de wond zat, is de druk hoog. Dit is de drukverdeling in de oude schoenen. Ook hier is te zien dat de druk nog te hoog is. Hier is de drukverdeling te zien in de schoenen die op maat gemaakt zijn. Er zijn geen hoge pieken meer te zien. Deze schoenen verlagen de druk dus goed, wat de kans op nieuwe wonden verkleint.
De belangrijkste maatregelen in het voorkomen van voetwonden zijn het dagelijks controleren van de voeten op drukplekjes, blaren, overmatige eeltvorming en wonden. Ten tweede, voordat de schoenen worden aangetrokken, controleren of er geen steentjes of andere losse voorwerpen in zitten. En tot slot het dagelijks dragen van de op maat gemaakte schoenen, zowel binnenshuis als buitenshuis.
Samenvattend zijn de drukken in de schoenen zijn goed en daarom kunt u vanaf nu de schoenen gaan dragen.
Gaan we doen. Ja. En als u de maatschoenen altijd draagt, dan wordt het risico op het krijgen van nieuwe voetwonden met de helft verlaagd. Geweldig. Het is daarom erg belangrijk dat u de maatschoenen ook binnen in huis draagt.
Dat gaan we zeker doen. Het was in het begin even wennen, mede omdat die schoenen zwaarder zijn. Nu ben ik er volledig aan gewend. Ik zou ze niet graag willen missen. Ik ben niet meer bang voor de wondjes. En ik kan veel verder lopen.
Okay, so finishing with this patient education video that concludes my presentation on therapeutic footwear for ulcer prevention, in particular the use of special shoes for indoors, which is an important topic within this COVID-19 pandemic times. So thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Chico, for your informative presentation. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I think that we can see the YouTube video, but I think that the people can see through the link that you are showing in your presentation. So
yeah.
For everybody, the presentation will be recorded, and we will upload to our webpage in the Foot International. So no worries about this, because this presentation is possible to see offline at any time for anybody that want to see. So we have now a time for questions and answers. So we have now some questions for one doctor from India. The question is concerning what is your recommendation concerning the offloading when the patient suffers for charcoal foot, and especially when has a rocker bottom and a high pressure in the midfoot?
So when it concerns offloading of a midfoot Charcot deformity, there's actually only one real important recommendation to make, and that is to use a non-removable total contact cast. It's not that we have a lot of studies on that, but we know that this is the gold standard treatment for such severe deformity in Charcot patients. And so that is the recommendation for that. The moment that they have went through their active phase of Charcot and they do have a rocker bottom with which they have to wear shoes, then the recommendation would be to prescribe fully custom-made shoes, because it's such a gross deformity in order to provide shoes to. So that needs to be accommodated, and that's often only possible in special-made shoes.
No, thank you. So we have another question concerning your expectation about when the lockdown is over, concerning what is probably the situation that we can expect to find the patient after this lockdown period. What is your idea? Because I think that we have one benefit and the other and one disadvantage. One benefit is that the people perhaps at home have less activity, do less exercise and activity, and the disadvantage is that the compliance for the people for the therapeutic footwear. What do you think about this?
Yes, well, it's of course it would be interesting to see how through this lockdown in many countries in the world, and the fact that patients have to stay at home, what their footwear behavior will be. So will they have followed the recommendations to protect their feet at every single time while staying at home? If they have, because the data that we have shows that when patients are outdoors, they are, at least these high-risk patients, are adherent to wearing their provided shoes. But the problem is inside the house. So if they have not been able to follow those recommendations, I think we're going to have quite a lot more problems after this crisis ends, with patients having developed more foot ulcers. It does stress that such provision of such footwear is important, and it stresses even more. And that's why I think this topic is interesting within this context of the pandemic, because patients are so much inside their house, and inside their house have much different habits than they would have when they are outside the house. So it is something to stress even more. And for the remainder of the time, I think it just stays very important to stress that patients should wear their provided shoes at any single time possible.
Thank you. We have another question concerning the studies that investigate about pressure and the difference between the shear pressure and the vertical pressure. Is there any difference between one of them? What is the main difference and the link with the risk to develop an ulcer?
Yes, that's always something that is a topic of discussion, because the pressures that I have been referring to in my talk are all vertical pressures, because at this moment we are not able to measure shear pressures inside the shoe. Even though we do think, from the development of callus, for example, and also the development of many ulcers underneath the callus, we think that it's an important factor. So shear is a factor that we think is important, but are not able to measure at this time. And we're really waiting for instrumentation and sensors that can measure pressure in different directions and not only the vertical one, because specifically in this diabetic foot population, we think it's important. So it's difficult to say anything reasonable about that now, how that would behave within the patient's shoe.
Thank you. Another question is concerning what is your recommendation for the students for educate the general population about how the people understand the benefit to use the therapeutic footwear at home. So how to combine the people to use the so even that you are stayed at home.
Well, I think it requires quite some education because as I said in my presentation, the reasons for not wearing the special shoes inside the house are all quite reasonable. I mean, it's something that non-diabetic patients who don't have a foot problem, these are very common reasons why you actually kick out your shoes, because they are dirty or they are too heavy, or you want to slip in something more comfortable, or it's just a habit of walking barefoot at home. So it's really mainly stressing the importance that whether being outside or inside the house doesn't make a real difference. And it's the importance of stressing to patients that studies show that they are much more active being inside the house, even though that would be a little bit sort of counterintuitive to a patient. But that's what the studies show in these high-risk patients, that they take much more steps inside the house, maybe because they are just not going outside the house that much. So therefore, it's sort of a mindset that needs to be provided, where something that may not be very natural for people to do has to be made very important for these high-risk patients. Now, we have been doing studies on special footwear that is made for indoor. You can also think about educational techniques of providing feedback for how patients use their shoes. But the main important thing is to also stress the importance by also showing patients what the data shows and what the studies show, because we have also found that when patients sense that their shoes can have a benefit for their feet in preventing foot ulcers, that they are also more keen on wearing them.
We have another question concerning. I know that you are involved in one study in preventing the very first ulcers. This is very interesting because the majority of the study are focusing in secondary prevention on the patients who suffer a previous ulcer. And I think that the more important thing is to try to combine the patient who diabetes and who any risk to develop an ulcer according with the classification of the International Working Group Diabetic Foot. To combine this kind of people to wear a therapeutic footwear, I think it's quite difficult, because sometimes when the patient suffers for a traumatic experience with an ulcer or suffer from a minor amputation, perhaps it's easier to combine to use this therapeutic shoe or using an insole. But when the patient doesn't have before or didn't have before any problem, it's quite difficult. So what do you think about how to combine this? Because this is the majority of the people, because some people call diabetes with neuropathy, diabetic with some deformities and neuropathy without any previous ulcer. How to combine? What is your advice concerning this?
I think, and of course, you're right. This is the larger group of patients that are at moderate risk for developing a foot ulcer, but have not yet experienced such an outcome. And for these in particular, the International Working Group Grade 2 patients who have loss of protective sensation and together with arterial disease or a foot deformity, they should at least have a proper footwear advice. So as the recommendation in the international guidelines states, is that they should have footwear that accommodates the shape of their foot and that fits properly. So this is, I think, a general advice that can be given to these patients that can either come from a special made shoe or from a good advice for factory-made shoes that may be spacious enough to accommodate the shape of the foot and may have special insoles that you can use for that are pressure relieving. So some kind of that kind of advice is needed for these patients, which can then vary from a good shoe advice to providing them, if they have major deformity, to a custom-made shoe. Again, maybe even more important in these patients, they should be stressed about how important it is to wear these shoes in order to prevent such a foot ulcer from occurring. And that is at the same time a very difficult thing to do, because patients who have not yet experienced a foot ulcer don't know how bad it is and what kind of outcomes can come from that, like infection and amputation. So you're asking the patient to do something, not to get something that they have never experienced before. And that's a difficult concept. But I think through good through good education and knowing what the studies show, even though we have much fewer studies on prevention of the first foot ulcer compared to recurrence, I think that's what needs to be stressed.
No, thank you. The last question, Zico, we have had several questions for people who are living not in the Western countries or different outside from Europe or United States. And it's a normal complaint for the people. Okay, the majority of the evidence is coming from European countries, from United States. So what to do or how to manage the patient in another part of the world or another region, for the people don't have money to buy a shoe, or when the climate condition is not able to wear therapeutic footwear. So what is your advice concerning what would be the solution for those people in other regions in the globe?
Well, I think, as you say, I mean, there may not be in all these regions, may not be the luxury of having custom-made inserts made in special ways, or the equipment of measuring pressures inside the shoe. That's something that is accepted, because that's not something that is affordable to within all regions and all centers. But what we do have is we have a lot of knowledge about what kind of elements in a shoe provide good pressure relief. And as I've said in my talk, this pressure relief is very important. So if you know, for example, your patient and where the patient has had a foot ulcer, somewhere underneath the foot, then that's the region to focus on. And there are actually very practical and easy solutions within using different kind of materials in whatever footwear solution that you can provide within a specific center or region or country, given, for example, the climate circumstances, etc., or the affordability of shoes. But there's a lot of materials that you can use to offload specific regions of the foot, using felted foam or other sort of materials to specifically offload regions of the foot. So it doesn't necessarily have to be very fancy, expensive shoes that you provide to these patients, but it's more, the recommendation would then be is to stress that the knowledge that we have on what kind of elements in a shoe provide pressure relief, I think they can be followed in the vast majority of regions within the world. And that's also something that we have in the international guidelines on the diabetic foot, because we realize, of course, we are an international working group, so we also need to provide guidelines for other regions than where all the studies are done. And also there we have within the guidelines the recommendation to at least take notice of all the knowledge that we have on what provides good pressure relief, and use materials and methods to provide that in any kind of footwear that you would normally provide to your patients in your center.
Thank you very much. Very informative. I appreciate a lot your collaboration in this initiative. I think the people, I have a lot of questions for you, but I think that I can get, and then if I find out any interesting, I can send you by mail. Thank you very much, Chico, for your support. It's a pleasure.
It was my pleasure.
And I hope to see you physically very soon.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, Jose, and it was a pleasure doing this.
Thank you very much. Take care and keep safe. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.